Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of Nasz Świat. Today we'll be speaking about quite important topic. We'll be speaking about racism in Poland, but we'll start with racism in football. Our guest today is Ewa Cylwik, I hope I haven't smashed your name, from NIGDY, Never Again Association. It's a very important organization in Poland that monitors racism in football and I think in Polish society at large. Ewa, welcome to our show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. Let's start by telling us a little bit about the work of NIGDY. For how many years have you guys been around? What kind of work are you doing?
Never Again is a political organization, an NGO, which started as an informal anti-Nazi, anti-racist group back in 1992. This informal group was later the basis, the foundation of creating the Never Again Association. So our history is quite long and we have quite a lot of experience with tackling racism, discrimination, neo-Nazis, all sorts of displays of animosity towards people based on their race, skin color, ethnicity, national origin, any kinds of discrimination.
Do you have an anecdote or a story about what did the people who founded the organization, what were they disturbed about at the time in Poland in the early 90s? How did Poland look like?
The first issue that gave start to the informal group that later was transformed into Never Again happened actually in a student dormitory. There was an incident, a racist incident, and Marcin Kornak, one of the co-founders of Never Again, decided to react to that incident. So there's actually a very specific point.
All right, and I think in the course of our conversation we can discuss how far has Poland gotten since 1992. But we can start with the concrete thing that brought us together, because we got in touch with each other because a couple of weeks ago your organization was attacked on Twitter by the head of the Polish Football Association, Zbigniew Boniek, who is also has been in the past, was in the past a famous Polish footballer. I don't know Polish football so far back, but seems like quite a respected person. And I would like to start by just hearing from you how that happened, like what made him make these remarks on Twitter. What did he exactly say about your organization? Why would Boniek have an issue with NIGDY?
I'd like to know the answer to the question why Mr. Boniek would have an issue with Never Again. That's actually a very good question, I think.
Maybe I have to ask him after this.
Yeah, he should be addressed with this question. His messages published on Twitter were prompted by UEFA. And
tell us what he said on Twitter, because this is like our audience doesn't necessarily follow this, so let's start from the ABC. What kind of stuff was he writing about your organization?
Following a fine issued by UEFA, which is the European Football Association, to Lech Poznań, one of the Polish football clubs playing in Europa League, due to a racist banner that was hanging in Lech Poznań supporters sector during one of the Europa League games. Mr. Boniek, the president of Polish FA, started a personal investigation into the case, pointing out that Never Again should be called out on snitching to UEFA against Polish clubs. He then went on to publish a picture of one of our colleagues and asking who is this person, creating an atmosphere of extreme animosity towards our organization and my colleague as well.
Okay, so we have a situation in which Lech Poznań exhibits a racist banner during a football match. And instead of the head of the Polish Football Association being concerned about this, he's worried that NIGDY, which is monitoring racism in football in Poland, is worried that you guys are snitching. And did you actually have a role in the UEFA decision? What's your formal role in this, if any?
That's one of the false information that's being repeated over and over again. The monitoring scheme introduced during all UEFA games, it's not organized, it's not coordinated by Never Again. This monitoring scheme is organized in cooperation with FARA, which is Football Against Racism in Europe, and it's this organization that is coordinating this program. Yes, Never Again is one of the member associations of FARA, but we are not responsible for running this program. The model of sending observers to football games was agreed between FARA and UEFA. It involves an observer or sometimes two observers depending on the countries from which the clubs playing the game come from and the languages that might be spoken by the supporters. Going to a game, they're in touch with the UEFA delegate. There's a delegate appointed by UEFA to each of the games. That's the most important person in all of the stadium. He's the one who makes all key decisions during the game. An observer or observers then report back to FARA on whether they witnessed any racist or discriminatory incidents during the game. They also send a brief report to the delegate. Later on, a person from FARA reviews the report and sends another copy to UEFA. So the observer is in touch both with the delegate and with FARA. So it's very hard to manipulate such a report. That was one of the accusations that was repeated over and over again, that UEFA is having difficulty with Polish clubs, that they're against Polish clubs. But looking at how this monitoring scheme is organized, it's actually very hard to do so, because such a report is being reviewed by many persons. Then, when it gets to UEFA, they have disciplinary inspectors that are in charge of the cases, and there's also the control, ethics, and disciplinary committee that actually makes the decision based on the evidence they have, the report they have. So it's many different stages.
So perhaps we need to take a step back to understand why the reaction in Poland has generally been this way, that I think instead of expressing concern about seeing racism on stadiums or done by clubs, by Polish football clubs, it's rather the reaction is rather to attack the bodies that are monitoring, or either national or international ones. And since NIGDY has been monitoring this issue for years, I'm curious if you could paint us a picture of how much tolerance there is on Polish stadiums. Just we can start with a general assessment and then we can unpack that a bit.
Yes, Never Again has been monitoring all types of display of racism and discrimination, which we publish regularly in our brown book. Those are not only related to football, so football constitutes only a small piece of what we actually include in our monitoring scheme, which is much broader. What happened in this case with Lech Poznań being fined is that the magnitude of the problem is not being recognized. People, including journalists, including Mr. Bojek, are saying, who is the president of the Polish FA, are saying that this is a minor issue, that this is just a random quote from a song, that this banner has been hanging in Lech Poznań Stadium for many years.
Tell us exactly what was the
banner. It was Legion Piła, which is one of the groups of the supporters of Lech Poznań, the blood of our race. This is a quote from a song by a neo-Nazi music group, Conquista 88, which says, for the blood of our race, for National Socialism, we'll fight till the end of our days. And moreover, 88 in the name of the band stands for Heil Hitler. So it's impossible to say that it's not related to a neo-Nazi ideology. It's clearly connected, and this connection is being neglected, and the magnitude of the incident is being diminished. And this issue got lost in this whole confusion after what was published on Twitter, what was then repeated by many people. And the problem is not being recognized. There was a very serious racist incident. And a lot of these attacks stem from not understanding that this is a real problem. People think that this is a small, tiny detail that someone decided all of a sudden that should be taken care of, but it's not. It's a very big problem. It's a serious incident.
Let's explain. I mean, try to explain to any Polish person who is thinks that this is just an innocent banner. That some young people that are kind of having fun and having their beers and enjoying the game are doing. Tell us why this is serious. Why we should be more concerned about this.
Considering, for example, history of Poland, where 70 years ago we had Auschwitz, the German concentration camp, Nazi concentration camp, when there was an open policy of eliminating certain groups of people based on their ethnicity, we should not treat any sort of display of a message related even remotely. In this case, it wasn't remote.
It was pretty explicit.
It was quite explicit. We shouldn't allow that. We shouldn't accept that.
So it's a kind of creating a climate, right? It's like with language, with symbols, we create a climate by which we perpetuate, or we rather make it possible for then violent action to take place, right? I think if you I imagine that these banners are dangerous because if you allow them to be exhibited, then, moving from them then to committing some small aggression against somebody who is of a different race, it's just the next step and so on. Like there could be some escalation taking place. I suppose that's what would concern me. I don't know if this is what you have in mind.
Yes, I agree. There's actually another example of that. A few years ago, also Lech Poznań was fined by UEFA due to a colportation of a sticker with the symbol "Good Night Left Side" inside the stadium. And the arguments of people who criticized this decision were the same as now. This was a minor thing. It's not just that it's anti-left-wing sticker. This graphic was created by German neo-Nazis about probably 10 years ago, and it includes a picture of two men fighting, a scene of a violence, and one is kicking the other on his head. So it basically has neo-Nazi origins and calls to physical violence. So it's not a minor thing.
Tell us a little bit what are the UEFA regulations when it comes to this kind of displays? What kind of rules do they have?
UEFA, in Article 14 of its disciplinary code, regulates the issue of displaying signs or chants or any sorts of behavior that discriminates against someone, for example, based on their race, nationality, skin color, and introduces a series of punishments depending on whether it's a offense offense or a recidivist. In general, for past few years, UEFA has been very clear on its zero tolerance against racist policy, and one of the results of this policy was raising the punishments for the clubs, because it's the clubs that are responsible for their supporters for racist and discriminatory incidents.
Are the punishments high enough to really impact the clubs? Because some of the clubs in Europe are quite rich, so paying a fine may not make a huge difference. But for example, is it that for the Polish clubs, if they get such a fine, do they take a financial hit or not?
The fine actually is being deducted from what UEFA is paying to the clubs for playing in a UEFA competition. So the club doesn't pay the fine directly. But the fine is only the first step. There's also partial stadium closure, there's full stadium closure, and even elimination from the competition, which is actually the highest punishment imaginable in this context.
Sounds pretty painful indeed.
Yeah, in case of recidivism, yes.
And over the last years, I don't know, as far back as you have been looking at this issue, the Polish club get a lot of the Polish clubs get a lot of these fines? Are there more than one or two examples, or that you quoted? Does this happen?
There are more examples, and every season there was a fine for a Polish club. But also, if you look even at the UEFA website, every 6 months they publish a list of all the incidents, not only racist incidents, all the disciplinary proceedings. And if you look into those based on Article 14, you have clubs from many other countries that were punished.
It's not only Poland.
It's not only Poland, but since we're in Poland, it's what is being emphasized the most.
So just to make sure I understood correctly, you said that there are fines given to clubs from a lot of other countries too, but I haven't understood if there are a lot of fines for Poland or comparatively or...
The rhetoric in Poland is that, the general rhetoric is that Polish clubs get more fines than other clubs.
That
but
we are like
we're
a
Poland
scapegoat, or
yes,
I don't know.
But we're in Poland, so people pay more attention to what happens with Polish clubs, and they don't really look at other fines for different clubs from many other countries.
Okay, and when it comes to the work that your organization has been doing to monitor these incidents, all part of the decisions of UEFA, what's your experience, again, in a kind of assessment over the years? Are these manifestations of racism, are they getting worse? Are they getting? Can you draw such conclusions? Do you see some trends in time?
With regards to UEFA games, we don't monitor them. From my research and information I got from FARA and UEFA, each year there's a number of incidents. Last season there were less than 2 years ago, but this year we have more than one incident again. In general, we still observe a few hundred incidents, racist, discriminatory incidents a year, which we include in our brand book. I think that one thing that has changed is that more and more people are becoming aware of the problem and notice an incident, know actually that this is a racist incident.
Could you give us examples of? So, I mean, I think we have examples from our discussion before of, exhibiting banners and racist signs as incidents. Could you give us other examples of things that have happened on Polish stadiums, or when Polish teams are playing, when Polish fans are around?
Oh, it's banners, it's monkey chants, it's chants against different groups. For example, not so long ago, this summer, actually, Legia Warsaw fans were chanting chant at Legia was playing against the Romanian team, and they were chanting. Yes. So you probably know they were chanting. Even if you shower, even if you use perfume, you're still a Roman. Roman is a derogatory term in Polish.
Yeah, they were. The Romanian community in Poland here noticed this, and
that's very important information for us.
Yes, we were commenting this, and we took offense. Of course, Romanians have their own issues with racism, and then there is an insistence on the side of Romanians to be distinguished from Roma, which is in itself racist. So it's becoming problematic. But certainly it was commented, and I think it made people feel less welcomed here for sure.
Yes, but also those incidents don't only take place in the stadiums. For example, a mosque in Podlasie. Podlasie is a region of Poland bordering with Kaliningrad, part of Russia. One of the mosques was actually, there's a very old, beautiful mosque there. It was vandalized. There was graffiti put on it. We have many reports of immigrants being threatened, for example, on the streets, or being discriminated against. So it's a very broad issue. But stadiums, also during the tension that is being created by the rivalry of the teams, are a very fertile ground for such discriminatory attitudes. So that's why it's open where the incidents take place.
I wanted to ask you just some features of racism in general here in Poland. So, for example, who are the targets of racism? Who is a big problem for the Polish patriots, let's say?
For the Polish patriots who believe in the notion of being a Tropol, probably everyone that's not white and Polish. But being serious about it. For example, lately we've been experiencing a lot of discriminatory comments concerning refugees that are going to come to Poland. And many, for example, comments, you can come across on them, for example, looking at the comments under articles on internet, say, oh, I have nothing against migrants or refugees, but as long as they stay in Germany or Sweden or maybe in Africa. This is a display of a discriminatory attitude.
It's even funny that there is so much aggression against migrants, considering that there are so few of them in Poland, like compared to other European countries. Of course, now with the discussion of quotas, maybe on the European level there might be an increase, but still, it's such a small segment of Polish society that it's amusing to see so much concern. What about response from other sides of Polish society to these displays of racism? So, is there does the Polish mainstream media, big political parties, do you feel like they are standing up to this, and that there is a strong public condemnation of such acts when they happen? What's your assessment?
I wouldn't call it a strong public condemnation. There's a division depending on what beliefs one represents, which is very visible. So there are always parties that stand against such incidents, and there are always those who don't see a problem. They don't think it's an issue. It takes a very serious, very clear incident to get a strong response in Poland.
Do you have an example when something like this has happened, that there was a kind of a sense of outrage that we don't, like, you know, in order to get a sense of how far does it need to get so that more of society is concerned?
For example, what happened in Białystok over a year ago, there were many attacks on immigrants, and at the same time there was a very misinformed decision of the court in Białystok regarding swastika signs. So all those incidents that occurred in a similar time frame generated a reaction from the mainstream media. For example, on the football ground, there was a banner displayed 2 seasons ago, a Lithuanian bastard kneel in front of your Polish master, and that also, there was a strong reaction to that, stronger than to other banners.
Okay, so I can bring us back to the Boniek case and ask you what kind of public reactions have you seen to this? You know, to his attack on your organization?
Coming from both sides, we get many signs of support. For example, there was an open letter published by a big group of Polish NGOs supporting us in this situation. They're saying that what Mr. Boniek did was outrageous and irresponsible, but there were articles by some of the journalists condemning his behavior, but at the same time, for each that's condemning the behavior, you can find one that actually agrees with his line of thinking.
I'm now thinking about what kind of expectations you would have from the head of the Polish Football Association. Like, obviously he shouldn't be attacking groups which fight against racism, but you know, what should the Polish Football Association be doing to limit this kind of racist incidents that you are monitoring? I'm sure you have some recommendations, just to, of course, not to give us the whole set, but to give us some sense of actions that could be taken on Polish stadiums to limit this kind of hatred, let's say.
First of all, recognize the problem. Admit that racism is a problem, and it's a serious one. It's not a small, marginal problem. It's a big, important issue. That would be the start of it. And I think that a lot of what's been happening lately comes from not doing that. Second of all, we've actually sent our materials, including guides and a list of best practices, to all the clubs from Polish Ekstraklasa and First League, and also to Polish Football Association. So they have many examples of what could be done, which were gathered from our own experience and also from our international collaborators' experience. So they can use those. But honestly, what I would expect from Polish Football Association and its president is to recognize that racism in football is an issue and to tackle it. I'm not saying that they have to cooperate with us. We're open to such a cooperation, but we would be satisfied to see that they're taking action with or without us. Of course, we're happy to help.
I mean, all they have to do is to listen to what UEFA says. Let's say that they don't listen to NIGDY and say, but they might as well at least listen to the guidelines of UEFA.
Yes, of course. Actually, there's guides of symbols that are banned from the stadiums, published by FARE, which was agreed with UEFA. They could start with this, so that they know what shouldn't be present inside the stadium, and they can build on that. If they don't want to work with us, they have other ways, and they have all the information. The banner that Lech Poznań was fined for was included in our brown book and in many of our materials, with a description that this is a banner that should not be displayed inside the stadium. So it's information that's available, and it actually takes someone to do the research and treat the issue seriously enough and take some action.
What about public opinion? It's a kind of thing a phenomenon that I'm observing since I live in Poland. Maybe you can help me make sense of it. So, I live in Praga Południe, and I'm quite close to the stadiums. There are Legia stadiums, so I often am on the bus when the fans are leaving the game or going to the game, and there is this atmosphere of fans chanting and jumping in the bus and taking over the bus. And sometimes I've heard racist things being chanted, even if I don't speak perfect Polish. It's clear, and I see that the people who are on the bus. I see a lot of these accepting smiles. So it's sometimes I see people who are reserved, so they stay aside and they're kind of like uncomfortable. But I see a lot of these accepting smiles. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on the general public opinion? Should we be doing something? I mean, should I be doing something? In general, I would be afraid to go and say, even though I must say that on the other hand, I know that I don't feel like they would attack me or anything. These are good, they are good kids. On the other hand, they stand up to make me a place in the bus or something like that. They help the mother with the child. It's a complicated thing, but should we be stepping up to, the citizens to stop these manifestations? What do you think?
If it doesn't put your safety in danger, I'd say you should stand up. I would want people to stand up. Of course, thinking about their safety, their well-being, but if it's possible, if they're not putting themselves in harm's way, step up. Even the fans in the stadium, imagine that they see someone putting up this banner, which is a banned banner, shouldn't be in the stadium. Imagine that there's a group that says, we don't want this banner here, because it's the club that's being fined. It's all of the supporters that have to bear the consequences of the fine issued by UEFA, for example, a stadium closure. Imagine if there was a group of fans that said, we don't want this banner here.
Right, because after all, Legia, if we think about Legia Warszawa, I mean, it has such a broad spectrum of football fans. I mean, and for sure these banners are just held by, 10%, or I don't really know, like a group of hardcore fans. So, and the others are, probably people like you and me who don't or may not agree or could at least think about the consequences on the team. So yeah, I think they could have an impact on their fellow Legia fans, for example, or Lech fans or something.
Yes,
like
of course, they could speak up and say that they don't want the symbol in the stadium. But it's not the kind of atmosphere that we have at present in Poland.
We'll be wrapping up soon. I just wanted to ask you to give us some sign of hope. So if there is any kind of a positive developments that you guys have been noticing in Polish football over the last years, either some team that is doing well, or just, I don't know, some authorities or some NGOs doing some nice constructive work that could be a step forward for...
I can give you an example relating to another example which I mentioned previously. A team from Białystok, Legia, started a close cooperation with our association due to two reasons. First of all, they had problems with racism in their own stadium, but also after what happened in Białystok, which I told you about, they came to a conclusion that cooperating with us would be beneficial to them.
And what this cooperation would entail?
We exchange best practices. We advise on what can be done to tackle racism.
So it would help them to kind of keep an eye on their fans and restrict this kind of expressions
or introduce a positive program. Yes.
All right. Let's hope that more teams in Poland follow this example. Ewa, thanks a lot for coming to the studio today and explaining us what's been going on. I hope that I hope that Mr. Boniek will come around and make more positive statements about, I think, the important work that NIGDY is doing for Polish society. But more important, that I hope that Polish people start reacting to these Romanians as well, and so on, that we kind of limit these expressions of racism. So thanks a lot for coming, and we hear each other again, dear listeners, next Saturday at 4 p.m. Goodbye.